Hi, everyone. So in addition to understanding how to count significant figures, we also need to understand how to apply the significant figure rules into doing calculations. Okay, so now the first thing I want to go over is going to be the rules for multiplication and division, and then we'll talk about the rule for addition and subtraction. Okay, so for multiplication and division, you're always going to be looking for the fewest number of significant figures. Okay. So you're going to look at each one of the values that you are multiplying or dividing. Okay, I'm going to make this a little darker so you can see that's a decimal. Okay, so now let's take a look at both of these values, and we're going to count the number of significant figures in each value. So this first value, 230.0. Now this 0 is significant because it is after a non-zero and before the decimal, so that's significant. And this 0 after the decimal and after the non-zero portion is also significant. So these values, each one of these are significant because it was able to measure to that exactness. So that 0.0 is there for a reason. Okay, so the measurement that was made was able to make that much accuracy. So therefore we call that 4 significant figures. Okay, now this number here has only non-zeros. There's no zeros there. So if there's no zeros, then you always count all of the digits. So here you have 1, 2, 3, 3 significant figures. Okay. So once you've determined the number of significant figures for each value, then it will be a matter of having your calculator and determining the math. Okay, so let's see what the calculator gives us. If we do 230 times 1.23, what the calculator tells you is 282.9. Okay. But now, does this follow the rule that states that you must round your final answer to the least number of significant figures between the values that are multiplied or divided? So the least number of significant figures in this operation here is 3 significant figures. Okay, so therefore your final answer can only be to 3 significant figures. So now, right now, the way it's written, it has 1, 2, 3, 4 significant figures. To change this to 3 significant figures, we are going to round the 282.9 up to 283. Okay, so that would be your answer for this multiplication applying the significant figure rule. Now, the same rule goes for division. So multiplication and division both have you look at the least number of significant figures in your operation. Okay. So now for addition and subtraction, we have a slightly different rule. It looks at the decimal places. So your final answer must be rounded to the least number of the least decimal place. Okay, so what that means is we're going to look at these numbers and we're going to see how many decimal places it goes to. This one goes to the hundredths place. Okay, so remember tens, hundredths. So this is the hundredths place and this is the thousandths place. Okay, so we want the least number of decimal places. So the easiest way to do an addition and subtraction is to write it vertically. Do 1.25 plus 33. Let me make the right space here to line up the decimal. Okay, so we're going to line up the decimals. 33.431. Okay, and we're going to add these numbers. Okay, so now by writing it this way, we get to see what is the least number of decimal places, okay? So I'm gonna just draw a line here, a dotted line, to indicate that that is where the significant digits are going to lie within this portion of the calculation. So when we add here, we're gonna still add all the numbers. You can do it in your calculator or you can do it in your head. Okay. So when we do it in the calculator, what you would get is 34.681. Okay. So now by writing it this way, what you're going to notice is that these are the digits that will be significant in your final answer. Then you look at the digit after it and you say, does this digit round it up or keep it the same? Remember, rounding is if it's 5 or above, it rounds up. Below 5 stays the same. So because this is 1, it keeps the value as 0.68. So your final answer here with the correct significant figures applied would be 34.68. Okay. So now what do we do though if we have both multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction all in one calculation? That's when we're going to apply the PEMDAS, so the order of operations, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, okay? I know that there's another acronym that is taught as well, but I learned through PEMDAS. If you learn a different acronym, that's perfectly fine, just as long as you recognize, what the order of operations are. So that's what we're going to move on to, is that next example, which applies the order of operations. So let's look at this. This is going to be times 85.0 plus 0.75 times 92.0. Okay. All right, so here's our problem. And now what we're going to do is we're going to apply the order of operations. First things first, we're going to do what's in parentheses. So the way I have this written, it looks like we have operations with parentheses, but these are actually just multiplication, okay? So you ask yourself, is there parentheses? No. Is there exponents? No. Next, we're going to do multiplication from left to right, okay? So multiplication from left to right, then that means we're going to do this multiplication. The addition does not come yet, so you just bring the addition down and then you do this multiplication. So let's begin with the left side here, 0.25 times 85. 0.25 times 85 is 21.25 from your calculator. Okay, so you want to keep the digits from your calculator, but you want to also be keeping track of the significant figures as you go. So even though we have all these digits, not all of them are significant. So I want you to get in the habit of underlining in each step which numbers are the significant numbers from that calculation. Okay, so now looking at the operation here, we had 0.25. Now this first zero is called a leading zero. Leading zeros are not significant. We do not start counting until we reach the first non-zero. So in 0.25, we have two significant figures. Okay, so here we have 2 sig figs. Here, 85.0, this is a 0 after the decimal and after a non-zero. This 0 is significant. There's a reason why it's written there. So this is 3 sig figs, okay? So now the least number of significant figures here is 2. So your final answer here would be these 2 digits would be the only significant digits in your calculation there. So now let's move on to the next side here. So the addition we don't do yet, we're still doing the multiplication. Looking at these values, we have 0.75. Again, this 0 is not significant. So this one here has 2 significant figures. This has 1, 2, 3 significant figures, just like we saw here. And now when we do the math in our calculator, 0.75 times 92, what the calculator gives you is the number 69, okay? That's what the calculator gives you. And now you want to ask yourself, how many digits are going to be significant? According to the least number of significant figures, it's 2. So both of these numbers will be significant to your calculation. So now the next step is moving on to the addition. So now we're going to put in our calculator 21.25 plus 69. Now your calculator here is going to give you 90.25. But now according to the addition rules, let's write it vertically. Okay. Now we only have this number to the ones place. So there is no decimal places here. So your final answer, 0.25, will only be to the ones place, okay? So these 2 digits are significant in your calculation. So these 2 are your significant digits in your final answer. So now, how do we represent this 0 as being significant? We place a decimal at the end of the value. And now that is your final answer for this calculation. Final answer is 90 with a decimal point at the end to indicate that that 0 is significant.